"You'll never be as good as your brother anyway," my father spat, his words echoing through his mahogany-paneled office. I stood there, gripping my business proposal so tightly the pages crumpled. 10 years of education, countless sleepless nights preparing for this moment, and he dismissed me with a single cruel sentence. My brother Jacob slouched in the corner armchair, awkwardly fiddling with his phone, pretending not to hear our father tear my dreams apart. My name is Madeline Brown, and I spent 30 years believing I was destined to help lead my father's company, Brown Technologies. I grew up breathing the business. Dinner conversations revolved around market strategies, and my weekends were spent shadowing department heads instead of playing with friends. Unlike Jacob, who'd rather be anywhere else, I lived and breathed the industry. I'd done everything right. Top of my class at business school, internships at leading tech firms, even learned Mandarin to help with our Asian market expansion. But standing in my father's office that day, none of it mattered. The only thing he saw when he looked at me was his daughter, someone to be married off, not trusted with his legacy. "Dad, just look at my proposal," I pleaded, trying to keep my voice steady. "The market analysis shows." "Enough!" He cut me off with a sharp wave of his hand. "I've already decided. Jacob will take over as COO next month. You should focus on finding a good husband. That's what your mother and I want for you." I glanced at my brother, who had the decency to look uncomfortable. Jacob was 27, had barely passed his business classes, and spent more time on his golf swing than in the office. But he had the one qualification that mattered to my father. He was the son. The familiar ache of being overlooked burned in my chest, but this time something was different. Maybe it was the way my father smirked when he mentioned finding a husband, or how he didn't even bother looking at the proposal I'd spent months perfecting. A strange calm settled over me as I realized that no matter what I achieved, nothing would ever be enough for him. "You're right," I said quietly, smoothing the crumpled pages of my proposal. My father looked up, surprised by my sudden agreement. I should focus on my future. I placed the document on his desk, turned around, and walked out of his office. Behind me, I heard him chuckle, probably thinking he'd finally gotten through to me. He had no idea that I wasn't surrendering. I was declaring war. That night, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by industry reports and market analyses I'd gathered over the years. Everything I knew about Brown Technologies was spread across my dining room table: supplier contracts, distribution networks, customer pain points. Information that most people would kill to have, handed to me simply because no one thought I'd ever use it against them. "Taking an interest in the family business is fine for a hobby," my father had always said with that condescending smile. "It's cute that you want to learn." Each dismissive comment had only driven me to study harder, dig deeper. Now all that knowledge felt like ammunition. My phone buzzed. Another message from my mother. "Your father means well," she wrote. "He just wants to protect you from the stress." I turned off my phone without replying. My mother had always tried to play peacemaker, smoothing over my father's harsh words with gentle excuses. But she'd never once stood up to him, never challenged his outdated views. The next morning, I walked into Brown Technologies for what I knew would be the last time. As I packed up my desk in the marketing department, my colleagues avoided eye contact. News traveled fast in family companies. Everyone knew about yesterday's meeting, about how Walter Brown's ambitious daughter had finally been put in her place. "I'm sorry, Maddie," Lisa from accounting whispered as she passed by. "We all know you deserved that position." Her sympathy made it worse somehow. How many others had watched me work twice as hard as Jacob, only to be pushed aside because I was born the wrong gender? I was nearly finished packing when my brother appeared in my doorway. "Hey," he said, shifting uncomfortably. "Dad says you're taking some time off to think about your priorities." "That's one way to put it," I replied, closing my laptop bag with more force than necessary. "Look, I know you're upset, but maybe it's for the best. Running a company is really stressful and—" "Save it, Jacob," I cut him off. "We both know you don't want this job, but you'll take it because it's easier than standing up to him." My brother flinched at the truth in my words. As I walked out of the building, carrying my small box of belongings, I caught my reflection in the glass doors. I looked different somehow. Lighter, as if putting down the weight of my father's approval had physically transformed me. One thought kept running through my mind. They had no idea what I was capable of. The decision to leave the country came surprisingly easily. I'd spent my entire life trying to earn my place in my father's world. Now it was time to build my own. Within weeks, I'd liquidated my trust fund, the one thing my father couldn't control, signed a lease for an office space in Singapore, and booked a one-way flight. My mother's reaction was predictably dramatic. "How can you abandon your family like this?" she sobbed over the phone. "Your father will never forgive you." I almost laughed at that. Forgiveness implied I'd done something wrong, and for the first time in my life, I was absolutely certain I hadn't. The real surprise came from my grandmother, my father's mother. She showed up at my apartment the night before I left, her small frame radiating determination. "Your grandfather would have been ashamed," she said, "but not in the way I expected. Ashamed of what your father has become. The company was built on innovation, not tradition." She pressed a thick envelope into my hands. Inside was everything I needed to know about my grandfather's original vision for Brown Technologies, including his personal journals and early business plans. "He always said the future belongs to those brave enough to create it," my grandmother told me. "Show them what that means." The first months in Singapore were a blur of meetings, coding sessions, and sleepless nights. I'd identified the biggest weakness in my father's business model, their outdated approach to supply chain management. While Brown Technologies relied on traditional relationships and manual processes, I was building something revolutionary, an AI-driven platform that could predict market demands and optimize inventory in real time. My team grew quickly. I hired the brightest minds I could find, people who saw the potential in disrupting an industry stuck in the past. We worked out of a cramped office with questionable air conditioning, but the energy was electric. Every day brought us closer to launching something that would change everything. The first major breakthrough came 6 months in. Our prototype caught the attention of a prominent tech investor, who immediately saw the potential. "This could revolutionize the entire industry," she said during our pitch meeting. "How soon can you scale?" With proper funding secured, we moved fast. Every weakness I'd observed in my father's company became an opportunity for innovation. Where Brown Technologies took weeks to process orders, our system could do it in minutes. Their manual quality control became our automated perfection. Their rigid hierarchy transformed into our fluid collaboration. I never mentioned my connection to Brown Technologies. As far as the world was concerned, I was just another tech entrepreneur with a vision. But late at night, when I reviewed our growing market share reports, I allowed myself a small smile. Somewhere in his mahogany office, my father was about to learn a very expensive lesson about underestimating his daughter. 18 months after my departure, my company, Novatech Solutions, had become the talk of the industry. Our platform was revolutionizing how businesses handled their supply chains, and companies were scrambling to integrate our technology. Every success felt like a personal victory, especially when I read reports about Brown Technologies struggling to keep up with the mysterious new player in the market. I was in a board meeting when I first saw the numbers that made my heart race. Brown Technologies had lost 30% of their market share in Asia, and their stock was plummeting. My father had always been proud of his personal touch approach to business, but in a digital age, that wasn't enough anymore. Clients wanted efficiency, not golf course handshakes. Another company from Brown's portfolio dropped our competitor's system for ours, my head of sales announced proudly. "That's the 5th one this quarter." The team erupted in applause, but I kept my expression neutral. They didn't know they were celebrating my father's downfall, and I intended to keep it that way. Later that evening, as I sat in my office overlooking the Singapore skyline, my phone lit up with a message from Jacob. We hadn't spoken since I left, but I wasn't surprised he was reaching out now. "Dad's losing it," he wrote. "The board is pressuring him to modernize, but he won't listen. Says he won't be bullied by some upstart company." I didn't respond, but I smiled at the irony. My father, who'd spent years bullying me into fitting his narrow view of what a daughter should be, was now being forced to change by the very person he'd dismissed. The satisfaction was sweeter than I'd imagined. The next morning brought news that sent shockwaves through our office. Brown Technologies had announced their intention to acquire promising tech startups in an aggressive expansion strategy. My father was trying to buy his way out of trouble, a classic move from his playbook. "They'll be coming for us soon," my CFO warned during our emergency meeting. "We're too big of a threat to ignore." She was right. Within weeks, we received the first overture from Brown Technologies' acquisition team. The offer was generous, far more than our company was worth on paper. My executive team was ecstatic, seeing it as validation of everything we'd built. "This is an incredible opportunity," my COO argued. "We'd have the resources to scale globally overnight." But I had been waiting for this moment for too long to give in now. "Schedule a meeting," I told them. "I want to handle this personally." My team was surprised. I usually stayed out of acquisition talks, but they didn't question my decision. They'd learned to trust my instincts, even when they didn't understand them. Little did they know, I was finally ready to reveal who I really was. That night, I stood on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker like stars. I thought about the day I'd walked out of my father's office, about all the nights I'd spent doubting myself, wondering if I was making a mistake. Now my mistake was worth millions, and the father who'd never believed in me was about to learn exactly what he'd lost. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Jacob. "Dad's planning to fly to Singapore himself for the acquisition meeting. Says he needs to handle this one personally." Perfect, I thought, putting down my phone. It was time for a long overdue family reunion. The day of the meeting arrived with a tension that crackled through our modern office space, a stark contrast to my father's traditional mahogany-filled domain. I'd chosen our largest conference room, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and stunning city views. My team sat ready, tablets in hand, professional and poised. When my father walked in, flanked by his advisors, I savored the moment before he noticed me. He looked older, more worn than I remembered. Running a failing company had taken its toll. His eyes swept the room with the arrogant confidence I knew so well, until they landed on me, sitting calmly at the head of the table. The color drained from his face. "Madeline?" "Hello, Dad," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Please, take a seat. We have a lot to discuss." His advisors exchanged confused glances as my father stood frozen in the doorway. I could see him struggling to process what he was seeing. His daughter, the one he'd dismissed so easily, now sitting in the power position. "What is this?" he demanded, his shock turning to anger. "What kind of game are you playing?" "No game," I said, gesturing to the presentation screen behind me. "Just business. Nova Tech Solutions is my company. I founded it, built it, and grew it into the market leader you're now desperate to acquire." The silence in the room was deafening. My team watched with wide eyes. This was the first time many of them were learning about my connection to Brown Technologies. My father's advisors were frantically whispering among themselves, likely realizing the implications of this revelation. "Impossible," my father sputtered. "You couldn't have... This isn't..." "What's impossible?" I asked, pulling up our company's growth charts. "That I created a solution that's revolutionizing the industry? Or that I did it without your help?" One of his advisors cleared his throat. "Miss Brown, regardless of your personal connection, we're here to discuss a serious business proposition." "Of course," I smiled. "Let's discuss how my company has captured 40% of the market share in Asia. Or perhaps you'd like to talk about how our AI-driven platform has made your entire business model obsolete." My father finally found his voice. "You did this to destroy me? Your own father?" "No," I replied, my smile fading. "I did this because you taught me that being a woman meant I couldn't run a company. So I built one instead, one that's better than yours in every way." His face reddened. "Name your price," he growled. "Everyone has one." I stood up, smoothing my blazer. That's where you're wrong, Dad. This isn't about money. It never was. This company is my legacy, the one you refused to let me build with you. I walked around the table until I stood directly in front of him. Your offer is declined. You can't do this, he said, but his voice had lost its authority. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. I already have, I replied. Meeting adjourned. As my father stormed out of the conference room, his face red with rage and humiliation, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. His advisors scrambled after him, leaving behind their untouched presentation folders, sleek black binders embossed with the Brown Technologies logo I'd grown up seeing everywhere. That was unexpected, my CFO said, breaking the stunned silence that had fallen over the room. You're Walter Brown's daughter. I turned to face my team, the people who'd believed in my vision without knowing my full story. I am, but more importantly, I'm the CEO who's going to take this company global. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. News of my identity leaked to the press, and suddenly every business publication wanted the story. Tech heiress disrupts family empire became the headline of the month. My phone was flooded with messages. Old colleagues, family friends, even my mother, all wanting to understand how the dutiful daughter had transformed into a business rival. Jacob's message was the only one I read fully. I always knew you were better at this than me. For what it's worth, I'm sorry I didn't say it sooner. My grandmother invited me to tea at her favorite restaurant, the same place she used to take me when I was a child. Her eyes sparkled with pride as she read the latest article about Novatech's success. Your grandfather would have loved this, she said, setting down her cup. He built that company believing innovation was more important than tradition. Your father forgot that, but you didn't. Market analysts predicted that Brown Technologies would need to undergo massive restructuring to survive. My father, they said, was being pressured to step down. The board wanted younger leadership, someone who could modernize the company before it was too late. But I no longer cared about my father's company. Novatech was expanding into Europe, and we were developing new features that would revolutionize the industry even further. My team was excited, motivated, and most importantly, valued, regardless of who they were. Late one evening, as I sat in my office reviewing expansion plans, my assistant buzzed in. Your father is here to see you. I considered turning him away but decided against it. Let him see what his daughter had built without him. He entered slowly, looking uncertain in this space that was so different from his traditional office. Madeline, he said, his voice lacking its usual authority. We need to talk. About what? I asked, not offering him a seat. Business or family? Both, he admitted. The board, they want you to come back, to lead Brown Technologies' digital transformation. I laughed, the sound echoing off the glass walls. You still don't get it, do you? I didn't build this company to prove something to you. I built it because I could, because I'm good at what I do. I don't need your approval anymore. He flinched at my words, finally understanding what his actions had cost him. Not just market share or company value, but a daughter who'd been ready to give him everything. You should go, I said quietly. I have a meeting with European investors in the morning. As he left, I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere in those streets was a young woman being told she couldn't do something because of who she was. I hoped she'd prove them wrong, too. The story of my overnight success became legend in the tech world. What the headlines didn't capture were the quiet victories that followed. Brown Technologies' stock continued to plummet as more clients switched to our platform. My father's board finally took action, forcing him into early retirement, a humiliation he couldn't handle. He retreated to his mansion, refusing to face the industry that had once worshipped him. Meanwhile, Novatech soared. Our European expansion exceeded all projections, and our development team rolled out innovations faster than competitors could keep up. The office buzzed with energy and ideas, fostering the kind of collaborative environment I'd always dreamed of creating at Brown Technologies. One morning, my grandmother came to visit our Singapore headquarters. As I showed her around, introducing her to my team and demonstrating our latest technology, she squeezed my hand. "I have something for you," she said, pulling out a worn leather journal. "Your grandfather's notes from when he first started the company." She opened it to a marked page, pointing to an underlined passage. "A true legacy isn't inherited. It's earned through vision and determination." "He wrote that the day your father joined the company," she explained. "I think he knew, even then, that innovation requires more than just birthright." The words hit home. All those years, I'd fought for a place in my father's legacy, never realizing I needed to build my own. Now, standing in my own company, surrounded by people who respected me for my abilities rather than my name, I finally understood what real success felt like. The industry that had once dismissed me as Walter Brown's daughter now knew me as Madeline Brown, the innovator who'd transformed supply chain management. I'd earned that recognition every step of the way. 6 months after my father's retirement, Novatech hosted a global technology summit in Singapore. Industry leaders from around the world gathered to discuss the future of supply chain management. I took the stage as the keynote speaker, my grandmother beaming proudly from the front row. "Innovation isn't about following traditions," I told the packed auditorium. "It's about having the courage to challenge them." The irony wasn't lost on anyone when I announced our latest breakthrough, an upgrade that would make traditional systems like Brown Technologies completely obsolete. After the summit, Jacob approached me at the reception. He looked different, humbler, more genuine. "I sold my shares in Dad's company," he confessed. "Started a small sports coaching business instead. For the first time in my life, I'm actually happy." I smiled, realizing we'd both found freedom in different ways. He'd escaped our father's expectations by choosing his own path, while I'd conquered them by exceeding them. My mother still sends occasional messages, trying to broker peace between my father and me. She doesn't understand that some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. I've made my peace with that, just as I've made peace with my journey. These days, when young entrepreneurs ask me for advice, I tell them my real secret to success. Don't let anyone else define your worth. The best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right. As for my father, last I heard, he spends his days in his study, surrounded by the mahogany panels that once witnessed his greatest mistake, underestimating his daughter. Sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones we learn too late.